Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Jane. My name is Clint Hodges. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be sober. Glad to welcome the people that are new or kind of new. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Nice to have you here. Glad you came by. This is Westchester. The sign says Playa del Rey, but we're in Westchester. I think, is that right? Yeah. I enjoyed the earlier talk. I was struck by the fact that Jane reported that she drank no matter what. That's my kind of girl, boy, I'll tell you. I remember sitting in a meeting one night when I was kind of new, and I heard Gail talk. Gail died sober some years later, and it's just one of these kind of charismatic figures around Alcoholics Anonymous, attractive person. And I was sort of new, and she'd been around a little longer than me, and she looked kind of cynical, so I was always glad to see her, because I figured if she was going for it, maybe there was something here, maybe it held its promise over the years. I hadn't been here very long, and I wasn't sure that it would be possible for me to stay in Alcoholics Anonymous. And Gail's up there at the podium, and she's talking about the Alcoholic's Prayer. How we all, some way or another, say some kind of a prayer when we get here. It's sometimes an angry prayer that doesn't feel like a prayer. And she said her prayer one night before she got sober. She came out of a blackout sitting on the mantle over the fireplace in her little Hollywood apartment. She's just kind of perched up there with her cat, and I like that about her, she just, and she said there was some cat food and vodka up there, little something for everybody, and they were up there because there was 4 or 5 inches of water on the floor. And I'm liking her better all the time, And it turned out she was up there, and the water was on the floor because she'd started to take a bath last Tuesday, and the whole deal got away from her somehow, And I'm thinking, I'd like to have dinner with you, Gail. She's the kind of person that wouldn't criticize my drinking, But she said as she sat up there, she said the Alcoholic's Prayer. And her prayer, maybe your prayer, my prayer, went like this: Jesus, God, what's wrong with me? That prayer, an angry prayer. We've said our prayer. We are, in fact, a lot of us are beggars. I have a friend in Chicago that says if he has any message, it's the message of one beggar talking to another beggar about where the bread is. Because we are so lost when we get here. We're so starved for something we know we can never have. We have spent a lifetime living out our second and third choices, giving up what we really wanted in our lives as little kids, most of us, and then stumbling across alcohol and making a career out of chemical peace of mind. needing desperately to escape that horrible sense of what is described in the book as restlessness and irritability and discontent when we're not drinking. And I think those words are kind of lightweight words in a way. You know, that's on our good days we have that sense of dis-ease, but on our other days we have a terrible sense of anxiety and a terrible sense of anger and a terrible sense of the unfairness of life and of the world around us. And we push even that down. I did over time, because it's not cool to whimper about it, you know, and we kind of try to rise above it, but we never leave it very far behind. We're very, very disenchanted with things, and usually angry at our parents or angry at God, or all of that. And I was terribly angry at my parents. My dad was a drunk, and I was mad about that. I was mad about his brutality and his violence and his temper, and it frightened me so much. And he was, we slept better when he was gone. And I was angry at my mother because she got the same way. I felt gypped in some way because I grew up in a religious home, and my mother and my grandmother would take us to church. My father would never have anything to do with that, but we'd go to church, and I knew that my uncle had gone down to the front of the church one Sunday morning to get saved in the Church of the Air in Billings, Montana. They sent him, he seemed like no time at all after that he was going to China to be a missionary. And I went, oh man, don't even go near the front of that church. You know, it's like, why would you do that? I got baptized one Sunday morning in early March in the Yellowstone River outside of Billings, Montana. The water was maybe 31 degrees. And I remember how little impact that had on me. I didn't find God, I'll tell you that. I didn't find much anything for about 3 days, as I recall. It got... And none of that had any impact on me. And my mom and I parted company when I was about maybe 7 years old. I was mad at her, really mad at her, because I knew by then that she didn't really love me. It wasn't true, but I knew it with every cell in my body. And it was all based on misunderstandings, all based on a horrible sense of having been displaced because she was paying attention to my little sister and all of that. And so I wouldn't do anything she told me to do. She could make me mow the lawn, but she could not make me clip around the edge of the sidewalk. I took a lot of beatings for not doing that. Man, she would thrash me, and I wouldn't do it. And so we parted companies. Like a little kid says, you don't love me? Great, I don't love you either. I don't love you. And you try to make that come true. You try to bury that terrible longing you have. Because when I was 4, before my sister came along, my mom and I were such wonderful friends. She'd tuck me in at night, and I would lay there in that bed, and we'd whisper and giggle and say our little prayers and tell our stories. And oh, I adored her. Oh, I loved her so. And she loved me too, and I knew it. And one day it seemed to me that it was gone. It was over. And she was on to other people and things, and I had been replaced from my point of view. So I was very angry. And there was a lot of violence in our home. A lot of beatings. And so I stood at a grave when I was 14 years old in the low rent part of the cemetery in Billings, Montana, and they buried my mother. She died of cancer, and I didn't cry. I didn't. What happened that day to me, and I was aware of it as I stood there. I didn't cry. I didn't say goodbye, really. I just stopped breathing deeply. I just lived kind of on the surface of my life then. And I was 14, and 2 years later, I was 16 years old, and I was at a party after a football game in high school, and the bottle of vodka came around. And I had some vodka, and I was immediately transformed. That night, I began to breathe deeply again. Boy, that's remarkable stuff. And I loved it. I loved it. I knew I would no one would know how much it meant to me. No one would know my little secret around alcohol. I knew that night why my dad drank. I knew, as I look back on it, I wasn't aware of it at the time, but within a year, I had something my mother told me I would never have. I had belief and I had faith. And both were rooted in alcohol. I believed in alcohol. Belief is an expectancy. And I didn't know that I was now believing in alcohol, but I was. I expected it to do something magic for me, and it had not let me down. And I had faith. And we have a capacity for faith, and we put our faith there. A faith is a confident trust born of experience. And I had faith in booze. Faith later on when I got into college, into amphetamines. I knew those amphetamines to get the job done. I know the magic of buying a bottle and locking it up in the glove compartment because I can't drink it right then, and feeling better. That's faith. Feeling. Did you ever get the prescription filled and the prescription handed to you and you put it in your pocket and you feel better? Yeah. Whew, my God, yes. Help is on the way. That's faith. Hi, how are you? You're just so expansive, and you haven't even had any of those amphetamines yet. I got to college, I got to dental school, I got thrown out of dental school, which was a source of comfort to a lot of the patients there at I went in the Marine Corps, and I loved the Marine Corps. I really did. I really liked it. The day I was commissioned as second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, I had such a sense of accomplishment, such a sense of belonging, and such a sense of pride in the best sense of the word. A real, I knew I would always wear that uniform with dignity and honor that day. And I got transferred out of Quantico and back out here to the Fleet Marine Force and spent the next several years, 4 years in Camp Pendleton and then El Toro. And I began to get a series of dressings down from my superiors, from letters of reprimand. I was offered an opportunity to resign my commission for the good of the service and to avoid a trial by court-martial. I became a disgrace to that uniform, and I hated that so much. I hated that. I'd been married and divorced twice now, and I had children, and I was living in the BOQ at El Toro in a little room, and I hung on as best I could during the day and would go over to the officers' club at night. I got out of there by the skin of my teeth with a good discharge. I moved to Glendale, and I started out living in an apartment in Glendale, drinking a lot. I didn't go to work. Pretty soon that money ran out, and I moved to the car, and then I lost the car somewhere. I lost that car. they just seize up sometimes, you know, when I'd been saving up for an oil change, and it was just gone. And I moved into what I used to call a garage. I lived there with 4 other guys, and last summer, my wife and I drove over to Glendale, and she said, let's go by and see if that garage is still there. I hear you talk. And I said, that's it right there. She said, that is not a garage.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
That's a shed. No car has ever gotten into that place. And I looked again, I said, that's right. That's just 4 of us lived in that shed there for some months. Sometimes I'd get home over there, and sometimes I'd sleep in the park or in jail. The shed was cut up into 4 little rooms. It had kind of a slant, and there was a light coming out of the ceiling in my little room, and there was a window, and I had, there was kind of a common shower for everybody, which I don't think any of us ever even turned the water on in there. Unless we wanted to rinse off a mattress or something like that. We just didn't go near that place. Little rooms smelled bad. They just smelled awful. I lived and I died in there. The thing I had left for furniture was a radio, a clock radio. And I'd plug it into the wall, and it worked okay, except it played a lot of strange music. Even after I pulled the plug out of the wall, that thing would play this weird music, and a group of people would gather outside that shed sometimes to discuss my case. I could hear them, and I'd sneak around if I had just enough booze in me, and they'd be gone. And I'd go back inside, and after a while they'd regather out there, and I could hear them talking about me. I lived and I died in that little room. I was selling encyclopedias door to door, sort of, when I could get out of there. The guy that gave me that job was a bail bondsman, and we had met in that line of his work. He'd bailed me out of jail a few times, and one day he looked at me and he said, I'm going to take you someplace today. And I didn't even ask him. And later that day, I thought maybe we were going back to jail or to county hospital. I was sick. Or maybe to Camarillo. That was a mental hospital up the road in those days. They didn't have recovery homes in 1966. They had one place out in the valley that was supposed to be kind of a place like that. It was run by a guy named Ron Shire, and they called it Shire's Dryer. It was sort of a little spin dry deal, and I had not made it there, and I knew I would be better off in Camarillo anyway, because by now I knew I had a brain tumor, and I hoped they would find my brain tumor, because that's the only thing I could think of that would explain my weird conduct. Explain why I'm living in a garage, explain why I can't even get there most nights, explain all of the goofiness about standing in front of the judge and saying guilty with an explanation. And he didn't take me to jail, he didn't take me to Camarillo, he didn't take me to county hospital. He took me that hot summer morning over to a club in Glendale. We went up a long flight of steps into what they called an Alano club. I had no idea what that was. None. I just did not know. And I sat down there with some people around a table like the ones that are at the edge of the room. 12 people, maybe 13 or 10. And I sat down with you. I was tired. I was really tired, and I was sick, and I didn't know what would happen to me. I just did not know. You seemed kind enough. I liked they were different than the people in the Church of the Air. They smoked. I liked it that they smoked. They cussed a little bit. I liked it that they cussed a little bit. They were people that seemed to have had their share of problems. And apparently they had quit drinking. And I went back and I went back and I went back for 3 weeks and got drunk again and was drunk for 2 weeks and came back to Alcoholics Anonymous in August that year on the 14th. And I came back a drunk. I got there about 10 o'clock that morning, and the guy that was running the club that day was somebody that was kind of a temporary or assistant manager. But I had seen him at meetings, and he was fine. And I said hello to him, and he said, "How you doing?" And I said, "Terrible." He said, "What happened?" I said, "I got drunk. I let everybody down, and I got drunk." He said, "Are you alcoholic?" I said, "Yeah. Been an alcoholic about a month now," something like that. He didn't go after me for that. He just let it go. He's very kind to me. But he said, "If you are an alcoholic, you say you're alcoholic and you got drunk?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Alcoholics do that. You didn't surprise us. You didn't let us down because you got drunk. That's what you would do." He said, "In fact, if you want to surprise us, get a job. That would surprise us. But hell, you're going to drink." He said, "If you're alcoholic, you're going to drink." And he used Jane's words. He said, "You're going to drink no matter what. You're going to drink no matter what. People tell you don't drink, no matter what, you'll drink. No matter what, you'll drink." And we do that. We do that. And this guy just kind of let me have the simple dignity of the fact. He, up until that moment, I knew that you had done something I could not do. I knew that you had quit. And I cannot quit. Because I had tried to quit. I had known at some point in my drinking that if it gets bad enough, I will quit. My wife says it's really bad, but of course she overstates it. And if it gets bad, I'll quit. I'll quit. And one day I decided to quit. And I told my wife I was going to quit. I told the chaplain at the base. I told my commander. I told the psychiatrist in the Navy, who turned out later to be a dermatologist, but I told him anyway. And that naval medical system that supports the Marine Corps was perfect. I told everybody that would listen. I told too many people is what I did, because I quit forever, and 6 weeks later I was very drunk. And I quit again in a couple of years, and I got very drunk in 2 weeks, and I quit again after that, and I was drunk by noon, and I quit on a daily basis for a while, and I got where I'd quit 4 and 5 times a day. And I knew I couldn't quit. I knew quitting was just, but I knew you had quit, and it would seem like that because some of us don't drink anymore. Most everybody that's in this room that's alcoholic doesn't drink anymore. But if we could quit, I doubt we'd be here tonight in this meeting. I don't think the program demands that of us. I think we have to let booze go. I think it's extremely important that we not drink anymore. But if we get into the idea that somehow or other by exercising my willpower I can quit, it suggests a power over alcohol that I don't have. I never quit. I never did quit. Chuck Chamberlain, before he died, used to say that he had his last drink on such and such a date. I had my last drink on August 14th, 1966, and I did not know that was my last drink. I didn't know that. And he said if I had known that was my last drink, I would have had two. You got to kind of commemorate the moment, you know. Somehow it is removed from us. Somehow God overtakes us in this terrible moment. And, well, the steps are up here. If it was about quitting, it would go, step 1, quit. It doesn't say that. It says, step 1, you got to get that you are toast. We're powerless over alcohol. Our lives have become unmanageable. That is a kind of an important place to get, because if I know that, I can do something that people in Alcoholics Anonymous do, and some remember it very clearly and some do not. I cannot remember the prayer I made that last night. I know this. I know that on the 14th of August, 1966, I was a drunk. I know that on the 15th of August, I was not a drunk. And I haven't been a drunk since that time, because I haven't had a drink. Because for me to have a drink is to be a drunk, because I just don't drink one or two, or I drink. It sets up a craving in me when I take a drink. A call that I must answer for the second and the third and the fourth. And if you're in the bar, the fourth one really isn't that good unless you know where the 7th and 10th are coming from. We know that there will be a terrible need for a lot of booze once we start. There is no way that I can quit. I cannot quit. I cannot devise any formula out of my own mind or out of my own sense of willpower or my own sense of purpose or out of my own deep need to quit drinking. And I think it's important that we get in touch with our powerlessness there, because if I have the notion that I have kept myself sober for 31 years and I have not had a drink for 31 years, I lose something very important, because I think that what I lose is the fact that I'm sober by God's grace. And that has enormous ramifications, and I did not want to hear anything like that when I was new. I had no notion that it would be, and yet I knew the day. I remember when I was 9 months sober, I was standing over here near the pier in Santa Monica. I had come across to, I'd borrowed a car. I didn't have I had just gotten my driver's license back. I had borrowed a car and driven to Santa Monica so I could see my youngest boy. And his mother agreed to let me spend a couple hours with him. And we stood near the pier, we're looking into the water and kind of just walking around and so on. And I remember the amazing sense of astonishment that I had when I realized, my God, I haven't had a drink in 9 months. It overwhelmed me. I had no idea. I knew I hadn't even wanted a drink in a long time, maybe 6 months, 7, I don't know. You'd think that you would know exactly when that terrible compulsion was taken away. I did not know. And I had not sworn off. I was just doing what they told me to do. And what they told me to do in that club in Glendale was to come back to a meeting tomorrow. Come back to a meeting. Go to another meeting tomorrow. Go every day. Did you drink every day? Yeah. Go to a meeting every day. Every day. Don't try to do this thing alone. Come and join us. Be part of it. And it brought tears to my eyes as I stood there at 9 months of sobriety that I hadn't had a drink. After all of that, I was deeply moved by the fact that I wasn't drinking anymore. And there isn't any real way to ascribe that to anything except God's grace. I knew I hadn't done that. I knew that it was not me that had somehow, by willpower, or even by going to a lot of meetings, or congregating with members of Alcoholics Anonymous. We are touched in a different way, and that makes our coming together very sweet. But I think and when I began to get that, I had not done it. I knew that God had, and I knew that something profound had happened to me. I knew that. I was changed. I was transformed. I was somebody other than the person I had been in the middle of August 1966. I didn't give it a lot of credence. It's easier for my mind to create a formula. Well, you go to 7 meetings and you get a commitment at each one. You get 4 sponsors and you call them all every 10 minutes, and we all kind of have a formula that is kind of parallel to the way we were doing things when we got sober, and sometimes we ascribe our sobriety to a formula that we have made up. And I don't think that I know this. I know that if in the book it says God has either solved our drink problem or he has not. And it turns on, I think, whether we ask him to. I think it's critically important to ask that, make that simple request. Take me to a place where I don't need booze anymore. Take this terrible thing away from me. Take it away. Take it away. And even our angry prayers are answered. He doesn't seem to care. The woman said, Jesus Christ, what's wrong with me? That isn't a bad prayer. That is not a bad prayer. The guy that wrote that little poem at the amphibious landing in World War II, it wasn't really even a poem, it was a prayer. I was touched by it. It came to light in some kind of Freedom of Information Act series of documents that were released, and somebody did a little write-up on what those troops that were slaughtered at Anzio Beach in the Second World War had written down during the 2 or 3 days they lay there waiting to die. And one guy said, God, come now, come yourself. Do not send your son. This is no place for children. And I don't know why that prayer touched me so much, but it touched me very deeply. I was touched because it's there, I guess because there's heartbreaking despair in that prayer. There is a knowing that my only hope is God's grace. And I think we all come to that point. It seems to be a part of the deal, and it happened to me. And it happened, and I also am acutely aware that although I have been a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and involved in AA for 31 years, I know this. I know that sometime during that period, I would have had a drink if it had been up to me. I've made all the mistakes that you can make in Alcoholics Anonymous. And we all do. We make mistakes. We don't immediately begin to live exemplary lives, most of us. We come in here with some scar tissue. We come in here with minds that don't work real well. We come in here with terrible angers and pains and bad choices and a deep sense of aloneness and a deep sense that we can't really live the life we always wanted to live. And then one day, something really remarkable happens. And it'll happen if you're new to you, and it has happened to me. We go back through this book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I noticed one day there's a guy named Bill Wilson that wrote the book, or he held the pen, and the book kind of came through him, I think. But he said an interesting thing. He said he was in England while he was still drinking, and really at the beginning of his drinking, and he was over there during the beginning of World War I, and the American soldiers were kind of celebrated by the British because we had entered the war, and they took, all you had to have was an American uniform, and you were kind of a hero, and they took a bunch of these artillery officers over to Winchester Cathedral one day, and he said something very briefly. He said, Much moved, I wandered outside. He's talking about a brief experience in that cathedral that day. And then the years go by and he becomes a terrible drunk, and he finally has an amazing experience after which he does not drink anymore. And he knew that it had been removed from him, and he's in Towns Hospital in New York going through the drying out process because he was very ill. And he had this experience of God, the kind of experience that most of us have not had, sort of a white light thing. And he reports it in this book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and he says this. He says, as I lay there in the hospital, my thoughts went back to my days at Winchester Cathedral, and the meaning of that experience was clear to me. He said this about that moment years earlier when he was profoundly touched, much moved. And he said this in the book. He says, the real meaning of that experience was finally clear to me. For a brief moment, I had needed and wanted God and was humbly willing to have him with me, and he came. And he came. But soon the sense of his presence was blotted out by the clamor of worldly things. And I realized as I looked at that has happened to me in AA meetings. This is my cathedral, and I have sat in meetings profoundly touched from time to time by what happened in the meeting. Something was said that moved me, and I was at peace at that moment, because it is surprisingly safe here in these meetings. And this has become my cathedral, and I'm sure yours. And I'll sit in the meeting, and somebody will say something or take a chip, or somebody will take a cake, and that's a person that is alcoholic, and they cannot stay sober, and I know they can't stay sober, and they've been sober a year. And they're moved and touched, and their families are reunited. And I'm just sitting there thinking, after all of that person's face has transformed. That lady has become pretty. She hasn't been pretty since she was a little girl, and she is pretty and soft. Much moved. And then after the meeting is over, I wander outside and I get on the freeway, and somebody pulls their car into my lane. And it is my lane. After all, cannot be just another guy trying to get home. It's my lane. And I lose it. I lose the sense of God's presence in my life. I don't even know what it is. I just know for a moment in that meeting, I felt safe and I felt at peace, and I felt welcome and loved and comfortable. And I go back because I want some more of it. I've tasted the honey. I have been touched by God in such a way that nothing less will ever do. And I go back, you bet. I can't drink. It's been taken from me. And I can't live apart from God. I thought for a long time I could have a life apart from him and from you. And I would just bide my time and wait until I could graduate from Alcoholics Anonymous and get on about my business. And that day has never come. I get increasingly comfortable here. There is a power here that is an amazing kind of a power. And I looked all my life for power. I always wanted power. We are power seekers. Lack of power is a huge dilemma to a power seeker. I mean, it's just awful. There are people here in Westchester that don't care anything about power. None of them in this room, but there are people like that. We want the power, and that's why the lack of power is such a horrible dilemma for us. And in my 31 years of sobriety, I have looked under a lot of rocks trying to find power. I wanted power out of this and power out of that, power out of money, power out of relationships, power out of a career, power out of sponsoring people, power out of speaking at a meeting, power out of any number of things. Having the right sponsor, being a part of the right group. And it turns out that my attempt to grab power is never worked for me. In fact, the whole inventory process is about that. There's a fourth step. It's called, we take a fearless and personal moral inventory of ourselves. And it says we are supposed to list the resentments that we have. People and institutions and principles that I resent, I write that down. Why in the world would Wilson have me start there? I think it's because I don't resent anybody unless they seem to me to be more powerful than I am. Even a guy on the street that comes up and asks me for a buck at that moment has the power to make me feel weird. You know, he goes on my list. What about that? Principles. Principle is kind of a powerful social mores, or institutions like the IRS or the dental school or the Marine Corps. They're powerful, and I don't have any power, and I resent them, and I write it down. What about that fear inventory? Who am I afraid of? I'm afraid of people that have more power. What about that sex inventory? Isn't my trouble in that department mostly about trying to get power from a situation that is not a legitimate source of power? I call it lust. And I have to look at all the ways in which I tried to grab my power and then talk about that with another human being. It's kind of an interesting thing, really. It's just like I played this game in a weird way, and I have to turn another direction now and look for power in another way. And we, without even knowing it, and George, who took the cake for 8 years, talked about the power here. It's love. It's just so weird to tell you that. It's like my sense of it is very strong that the power is love, that God is love, that we have an unaccountable way of loving one another, and that we're here to love one another. God is, we all know He's love, and we all know He works through people, and I think God loves me through you and loves you through me. If you're new here, we love you. We do love you. And it's kind of selfish in the sense that there's a lot of healing around it, but it's our healing. It's the love you give that heals you up. But this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous is remarkable in this sense that if you stick around here, some guy that's newer than you will come and sit by you, and you'll find yourself loving that person, and your healing will begin. And for, 62 years now, we've called that Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.